Max Harper had always been a creature of habit, tucked safely into the concrete corners of Portland. At 32, he lived a life built on quiet routines. Long hours hunched over his laptop in small coffee shops, short conversations with familiar baristas, and lonely nights spent scrolling past pictures of places he'd never dare visit. His one-bedroom apartment, neat and sparse, overlooked busy streets where life pulsed loudly, but never touched him. He told himself he was content. After all, he had work he enjoyed, a roof over his head, and enough small distractions to fill the silence. But deep down, in the spaces between emails and muted dinner deliveries, a gnawing emptiness had started to take root. It was the kind of loneliness that didn't shout. It whispered, growing louder in the quiet hours when the city lights blinked against the dark. Max had friends, sure, but nobody who truly knew him. Nobody who looked past his easy smiles to see the man quietly aching for something more. And though he wouldn't admit it, a part of him feared he had missed his chance to ever be truly known or truly loved. Life, it seemed, was safer when kept at arm's length. Until Sean called. The message came on a Thursday evening, when the sky outside Max's window sagged with rain and the glow of the city seemed more distant than usual. Sean Rivers, his college friend turned wilderness addict, had sent a short but jarring text. One last trip before summer ends. You need this, Max. Attached was a photo, a wild, endless stretch of forest under a burning gold sky, so different from the gray streets Max called home. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. For years, Sean had been the one pulling him toward open spaces, hikes he never showed up for. Camping weekends he always found excuses to avoid. Nature, with its silence and vulnerability, felt too raw, too exposing. But tonight, something in Sean's message stirred an ache deeper than fear. A longing to break free from the invisible walls he'd built around himself. You need this. It sounded less like an offer and more like a lifeline. Still, his instinct was to say no, to retreat into the comfortable cocoon of his solitude. Yet Max found himself typing when, before he could talk himself out of it, he knew the moment he hit send that something had shifted, some quiet rebellion against the loneliness he had mistaken for safety. What he didn't know, couldn't know yet, was that this single, reckless yes would be the first step toward a journey that would unravel his carefully guarded heart in ways he was both terrified and desperate to experience. The storm didn't arrive with a warning. It fell upon them like a trapdoor springing open, swallowing the trail, the sky, and every shred of comfort in an instant. One moment, Max and Sean were winding up a sun-dappled ridge, the air crisp and alive with pine and promise. The next, clouds devoured the sun, and the first raindrops came down fat and furious. They quickened their pace, but the trail became a river of mud, and visibility shrank to a trembling gray veil. Sean, usually so sure-footed, hesitated at a fork where two trails splintered off, each half erased by rain. He chose left. Max, heart thudding, followed. It wasn't until they stumbled into thick bramble and saw no sign of a path that the truth settled like a stone in Max's gut. They were lost. The rain turned violent, battering them sideways, the cold slicing through their jackets like knives. Every instinct in Max screamed to panic, to curse, to blame Sean for dragging him here. But when he caught the flash of uncertainty in Sean's eyes, the first crack in his steadfast armor, the anger dissolved into something harder to name. Fear. Real, primal, chest-crushing fear. They needed shelter, needed a plan. Instead, all they had was each other and the battered, confusing wilderness closing in around them. And for the first time, Max realized how terrifying it was to be truly vulnerable, not just to nature, but to another human being who might also be afraid. The cave was barely more than a dent in the hillside, but to Max and Sean, it felt like salvation carved out of stone. They stumbled into it soaked to the bone, the world outside lost behind a curtain of howling rain. Their breath clouded in the frigid air as they stripped away their sodden clothes, modesty falling away with each freezing layer. Max's heart raced, not from the cold, but from the raw, almost unbearable closeness of it all. Under the emergency blanket, their skin touched, tentative at first, then pressing fully together out of necessity. Sean's body was warm and solid against him. His heartbeat a faint rhythm Max could feel more than hear. They didn't speak. Words would have shattered the fragile, aching silence that wrapped around them tighter than the blanket ever could. Max closed his eyes, focusing on the rise and fall of Sean's chest, the way their legs tangled naturally, the quiet, unspoken comfort in the way Sean's hand rested lightly against his back. For the first time in years, Max wasn't thinking about deadlines or disappointments or the hollow ache of solitude that clung to him back in the city. Here, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but storm and stone around them, he realized how desperately he had missed being truly seen. As the wind raged outside, something softer, but infinitely more dangerous, began to stir quietly inside him. Morning broke not with a roar, but with a hush of fragile, golden light trickling through the storm-battered trees. Max stirred beneath the emergency blanket, the cold bite of the mountain air waking him slowly. Sean was already awake, his arms still lightly draped across Max's waist, a silent anchor against the chaos of the night before. For a moment, Max allowed himself to stay there, feeling the easy, unguarded weight of Sean's touch, something that spoke of trust, of something too deep for casual friendship. When they finally separated, awkward but smiling, the world outside the cave seemed almost reborn. Rain-slicked leaves glittered like jewels, the mountains wearing a fresh, misty crown. Together, they ventured out, gathering their damp gear in a companionable silence heavy with unspoken questions. Sean bent over the map, brow furrowed, determined to find their way back, but Max barely saw the lines and symbols. His attention kept drifting to Sean, the way the early sunlight caught the wet strands of his hair, the quiet resilience in his movements. The trail back to civilization might have been mapped out, but the path between them was uncharted, delicate, and unbearably tempting. As they packed up to leave, Max found himself stealing glances at Sean, not with the careless affection of old friendship, but with the raw curiosity of someone discovering a whole new world where an old one used to be. Everything had changed, the forest, the air between them, and most terrifyingly, himself. The trail wound before them like a promise half whispered and half forgotten. With each step, Max felt the weight of everything unspoken pressing heavier against his chest than the damp backpack clinging to his shoulders. Sean led the way, occasionally glancing back to check on him, his smile quick but tinged with something Max couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or fear. Conversation came in soft, careful bursts, pointing out a deer track here, a strange rock formation there. But beneath the words ran a stronger current, a question neither dared ask aloud. Was what happened between them last night just survival, or something deeper cracking through years of habit and fear? The forest, too, seemed to listen in, every rustling branch and bird call amplifying the silence they left between them. When Sean slowed at a bend in the trail, offering Max his water bottle, their fingers brushed, a fleeting, electric moment that lingered longer than it should have. Max clutched the bottle, pretending not to notice the way Sean's gaze softened before he turned away. Every mile back to civilization felt like a tightening of the rope between them, pulling taut with all they hadn't said. Max had always thought of wilderness as something to be survived, endured, but now he wondered if the real wilderness wasn't the storm or the forest. Maybe it was this fragile, terrifying new thing growing quietly between them, wild and wonderful and waiting to be named. As the morning sun stretched its pale fingers through the trees, Max found himself stealing glances at Sean, seeing him not with the familiar lens of long friendship, but with the fragile, aching clarity of new understanding. Sean crouched near a patch of moss, studying the map spread out over a sun-warmed rock, his brow furrowed in concentration. Drops of rain still clung to his hair, catching the light like tiny crystals. There was a steadiness to him Max had never fully appreciated before, not just the rugged competence that made him fit for the wilderness, but a quiet patience, an ability to stay when things got messy or frightening. Watching Sean now, Max felt a deep, unexpected tenderness bloom in his chest, subtle but unstoppable, like water finding its own path through stone. Maybe he had spent years shielding himself from seeing Sean fully, afraid of what it might stir in him. But now there was no hiding. Last night had torn down the walls Max hadn't even realized he'd built. As Sean looked up and caught Max staring, a soft, knowing smile flickered across his face, shy but fearless. Max looked away quickly, heart pounding, but the moment stayed, suspended between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. For the first time, Max didn't feel the old loneliness pressing in. Instead, he felt a fragile, exhilarating hope that maybe, just maybe, he had been found without even knowing he was lost. Back in the familiar hum of the city, life seemed almost surreal to Max. The crowded streets, the swirl of coffee shop chatter, the distant wail of sirens, all of it felt smaller now, somehow dimmer compared to the wild vastness they'd survived together. Sitting across from Sean at a cozy corner cafe, the scent of espresso thick in the air, Max realized the real journey hadn't ended on the trail. It was just beginning here between them. Their laughter was easy but edged with a vulnerable hope, like two people daring to believe in something fragile and rare. When Sean reached across the table, his fingers brushing Max's in a silent question, Max didn't hesitate. He turned his hand over, letting their palms press together naturally, as if they'd been made to fit. It wasn't grand or dramatic, no sweeping declarations or perfect timing, but it was real. And for Max, after years of confusing loneliness masked by routine, that reality was more thrilling than any mountaintop view. As they walked out into the city night, side by side, Max understood. Not all adventures needed forests and storms. Some of the greatest journeys began quietly, with two people simply choosing to step forward together. In today's busy world, it's easy to fall into routines that feel safe but slowly numb our sense of wonder. Max and Sean's story reminds us that real growth often happens when we step outside our comfort zones, whether that's saying yes to an unexpected adventure or opening our hearts to someone who sees us deeply. Life isn't about staying comfortable. It's about being brave enough to risk discomfort for the chance to find something meaningful. So take a step, even a small one, toward the unknown. You might just find a part of yourself you've been missing.